class today? What's that? Well, no, but
Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Matthew. It's summer 2019 SIP Fair. I want to welcome all of you. Yes, woo! Thank you for all joining. That's a very, very big and nice crowd. So we're coming out to actually celebrate the students who are going through one of their final graduation requirements of presenting a works that they've been working on for the past few years. And it comes to fruition here when they actually get to present it. So I just want to give you guys a heads up that we are also going to be doing live voting today. So we have a simple word called Viewer's Choice. So if you notice when you walk out here in the Commons, there's a screen that's going with a live voting session. To actually vote for your favorite project that you see today and to get an award for Viewer's Choice based on the crowd's approval and want. We're going to walk you through how to do it. You go to soccerdiv.com up here is where we're actually doing the live voting. We're going to go hit the login screen, and you're going to hit the student login. And then you're going to do my room number, which is Smith 8950. Room number there. We'll click join. Enter a name. Thank you. And then you will vote for your favorites. As soon as you put in a vote, don't vote you. As soon as you put in a vote, it will live tally right out there so we can actually have a nice little live voting session going on. Smith 8950. Vote for yourself? Wait a minute. Hey, someone anonymous. It's perfectly fine. But, so, yes, get ready to put that into your phones. Get ready to live vote for who you feel is the best today. We have seven projects going today, so I'm very excited to introduce them and have them go. But without further ado, everyone good? Let's go ahead and get this beautiful show on the road. We're going to open with our first project with our Group A, Miguel and Anderson, if you don't mind.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Hernandez, and I'm majoring in game programming.
Hi, I'm Anderson Fisher, and I'm game programming and game design. Okay, so we did a project called Polygraph Mechanic. Our innovation is to create a game mechanic that is themed around the idea of interrogation polygraph test. The player is tested with answering a questionnaire that takes not just your decisions, but your decision-making habits.
So for the designer tool, the programming portion uses an algorithm that takes scripts from one object, from a parent object, and then puts them all into a new object that it creates, and then turns that new object on and off when you're hovering over the certain object. So it's efficient for the system to have multiple things being recorded in the backend.
So our system accomplishes things similar to real polygraph because the real polygraph asks you several questions that are baseline and correct questions. Simple things like how are you and what's your name, how old are you, rather than things that'll be honest answers. That way they can get a baseline on how you react to those questions. Then real interrogator would ask you serious questions, why you're here, or what we're accusing you of, kind of thing, and then they measure that answer based on your previous. The way we do this, our main system for asking the questions is called a questionnaire script. It works on a switch, so it goes case by case. Basically, just a bunch of if checks to see what your original answer was, and then pull out the next question. We also have an interjection system, which is there to there is, you can't see it right now, but there's a suspicion meter on the table. That meter fills up if you contradict yourself, or way way we have the interjections working is if you last too long, if you take too long to answer a question, kind of step in and say, hey, what's taking so long? Hurry up. We also have it with the tool where if you're hovered over an answer, as you can see, it kind of moves your head when you look around. He says, what are you looking at? And kind of questions you with suspicion. This is the final question of our questionnaire. This is kind of where most of the systems come together. It will, and we'll maybe see a screen that shows the parameters. It is constantly recording your time in each question, how long it takes you to answer your question. It averages them out, plays that down at the bottom. So it'll take, for that last question, it will take your first 5 or 6 questions, and take that average time on how long it takes you to answer, and multiplies it by a multiplier. Through testing, we kind of figured somewhere around 4 or 5 times longer, because these questions are so small. That question is big. We just kind of saw in testing that you quadruple the amount of time to answer this thing. And then it sets that time to the new, the notification time is what the, where it comes in and says you're taking too long. So based on your previous answers, the first 5 answers, it'll record your times, average them out, multiply them by that multiplier, and then set a new time to say, hey, you're taking too long because you answered these questions on average this week. So the mechanics themselves are fairly versatile and applicable wherever. I don't know if you saw, he had some in the lights. We have some out there, put on the exit, make something happen. You pretty much put them anywhere and make something happen as long as you're looking at it long enough. But the original kind of goal was to create a system that not only works in this realm, polygraph, measuring someone's habits and then throwing them back in your face to kind of keep you honest. I somewhat picture it in like an RPG or something like that. You look at an item for long enough and it builds your intelligence or connects your bond with the item. It can be really versatile.
The system in the back end can also be brought forward to VR systems or as an educational tool.
Yeah, eye trackers got really good. It was just a lot.
And for prior art, what we wanted to do initially was use hardware to track your pulse, but that got a little. So we decided to gamify it a bit. Thank you very much.
Give you guys some credit. You guys, I was thinking of questions as you were talking, and you kept on answering them. I'm like, oh, that was a question I wanted to ask. You answered it. You're doing a good job. So good job with that. But in general, I think it's important, like I said, when you're creating this, one of your innovations is to make it feel like a real polygraph. What was the design process to getting that? Well, how did you collect the data? How did you figure that out? And then more importantly, how did you learn that it was working through testing?
Well, one thing we came across in research, and this kind of hinders a little bit of it being a polygraph, is that polygraphs aren't factual. It's very much just measuring your responses and your habits and then comparing them to a serious question that can catch you in a lie kind of thing. But I think we kind of took that aspect of it to the forefront, because yes, you're not going to necessarily catch someone in a lie with this, or you're not going to catch someone in a lie with a real polygraph test if they know what they're doing. But the goal was to make it through the back end not seem like anything is really occurring. You're just answering questions on a questionnaire, and then all of a sudden you're being honest or forced to confront your habits.
What are some of the things you've noticed through testing? How do you make it tweaks?
Well, if you could click through all of them, we had to make that because 0.01 times 4 is still something tiny, so we had to make that a minimum requirement. I don't even remember what we said it to, but
Yeah, we we set the 10 seconds flat, just so that you can answer the last question. But yeah, if you span through, that's one of the areas that occurs. Like if you're answering questions just belligerently, obviously the detective isn't going to get accurate information.
Lots of people would look around, and that was literally someone was staring at the exit, trying to see if anything would happen. So we were like, all right, well, let's move it. So yeah, questions you, or if you've gotten far enough, he just lets you go. Yeah, we kind of just started looking for little interactions that would make people feel like it's more real. I don't know if that really is.
Oh, that's good.
Real quick, so you did look at path as well, right? You followed the eyes. Because really, those are the only two data that I can see is time and path.
Yeah,
They're the easy.
time, path, and your choice.
Yeah, the final decision. One thing though, if you could actually do polls really cheap, less than $15. If you, so just test for robotics guy.
Let's make this better.
Have you guys, it kind of seems like it's built more towards it. Have you guys thought about doing virtual reality at all and just using, head tracking and things like
You could definitely throw this into VR, and it would honestly feel a bit more, say, immersive if you threw it into VR.
that? Absolutely.
It's a little out of my scope.
Yeah, it's a ways. I'm capable of doing VR, but it would take a little bit more time.
Might even do it.
One last thing too, Tony's got a real good eye tracker that works out really well, right, Tony? What tracker is it?
Toby.
Toby, it works fantastic.
Yeah, the eye tracker would be nice too. So you could replace the cursor with just what you're looking at.
In your research, did you find any comparable tech either in game or in just detective that compared to the type of work that you were doing?
I mean, there's some, like, I think what was it? Some of those, it was kind of that, like, inspect the item, and if you get the right angle, like, it reveals something. It's similar, but it's not exact. No, I don't really think we came across that much.
Because it just takes in a lot of elements that like nobody uses in
NPCs will have like visual timers that you look at that'll figure like this was we wanted basically Red Dead without the input. I don't know. I just I have a thing for the openings. I wanted to. It's just
As far as hardware, we just gamified it, so we didn't on that. We knew what hardware systems we could use, but we came from it.
just wanted to leave it pretty generic. All right, good job, guys.
Next up, we have Frank.
So, Frank Wolman, UAT. My name is Frank. So yes, I'm still the primary and system game designer for this project. Peter Tiblis did help me with some with the game design stuff. There were some artists on it, and Devin is actually working on creating some 3D models for it. The innovation was, the idea was to make mechs modular. My plan is to use them as squad leaders for another game that I'm working on in the Adams class, which is Mechasol. This allows for player to customize the mech based on his play style or her play style, terrain, mission. So if you need something with a little longer range, use a long range. Something with a little more melee or hand-to-hand combat. If you're going to do a lot of road work, then you could use the wheels or the tracks. If you're going over rougher terrain, you can use the legs. The whole idea was to make the bots modular. The innovation for this project kind of came up where if you go to your local hobby shop, especially Outpost Games, you'll see them playing BattleTech on these 4x8 sheets of plywood or even larger. I wanted something a little smaller, something you could fit on the kitchen table. Doesn't take up as much room, a little more portable, and a lot less expensive. It costs over $1,000 or more for just a standard army for BattleTech. And a lot of this inspiration came from Dr. Hugh, actually.
Dr. Hugh.
It is now. It is. Anybody have any questions?
I've got one
Yes.
right away, right? So a lot of the innovations that we see coming out of the game program tend to be for digital games, right? Can you tell us more about the game that this kind of fits in and why that's a big part of your innovation? And kind of how does it work? Like how does it look? How do they come together?
Okay. This is actually more for a board game. I'm a little older than the average student around here. And so I'm still into board games. And so the idea is, now for the game, the pieces will probably be a little smaller. They'll fit in a nice little clip along with the other pieces within the game. But like I said, it's going to be more for a board game. There's no reason why I couldn't eventually be part of a video game, but mine is for the board.
Show these off tonight? I know they're being handed around. but
Right. Well,
everyone to see them.
I only had a few, but the point is that you could modularize this. So you got a torso with tank tracks. You can throw in your grapple arm and maybe a long range weapon. And again, the slides are, you can modularize it based on your play style, your terrain, mission type. Yes, ma'am.
I'd love to understand what your next steps are. I think you mentioned that this is for another project that you're, and I've seen this a lot on sheets. Is the goal next to prototype it into a 3D model, or what is your next step in the project?
Right now, I'm working on a board game, and I really want to get that done first. I'm still doing a lot of play testing, to figuring out ranges and movements and things like that. My plan was that these would be specialized units, part of some sort of an expansion pack that you can add to the game. And again, so my plan, eventually, I would like to do 3D pieces. And Devin and I were working on trying to figure out how they would go in and lock in. But yes, that would be the long-term goal. Yes.
Yeah, right. So, oh, fun idea. I love board game aspect. Have you thought about rather than having 3D printed actual pieces, rather small LCD screens, so liquid crystal display screens, that you could project on the screen what the robot is, and you can change, maybe have an up or down key to change the different styles of the torso head. And then you could actually hook it up to a central piece so that it's a board game, but the central piece could keep track of resources spent on this piece versus this piece and say you don't have any more resources to have another piece in play. So it kind of interacts computer with the board game. So you're still using the board game, but the computer is like the Monopoly money, where they have to do swiping for Monopoly, where you swipe it on a card. That type of thing, so that it would keep them in the room.
That's a great idea. So what are you doing the 2 weeks between semesters? Anyone else?
So I was going to say, anyone who knows you, your influences are very strong in 2 things, the traditional board games, and then of course your military background. How did you apply real life experiences from the military and so on to your designs? Like I said, I've seen you enough to know that you're always kind of thinking, so what are some of those influences?
Well, again, the whole customizing it for the mission. That would certainly be my military background. We do a lot of customizing depending on what the mission is and what assets you're going to use. Now, obviously, in the real military, you know, it depends on whether we use infantry or tanks or aircraft. These are fantasy or science fiction, so putting them all into one thing is not above realm possibilities. But again, yeah, board games. I mean, I've been playing board games since the 1970s, so, and I haven't stopped yet. Good. Keep it up. So, anyone else?
Good, Frank. Oh, 8950.
Thank you.
You ready for? Oh, your mind. All right, our next student is actually virtual and online, so he's going to be hijacking our screen, hopefully. Jeremiah, can you hear us?
Yeah, he's talking.
Was it Jeremiah?
Okay.
Change your audio device.
Jeremiah, they have it on the audio, Jamie, if they're-
We can hear you, we just need to make our volume louder. Louder.
Well, if you go through your, in the Teams, it might be in the settings of what audio device it's using.
Hello? Let there be sound.
All right, Jeremiah, you're loud and clear.
Fantastic.
Start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, I'm Jeremiah Bailiff, and this is the Mutant Ability Manager. Take a moment, let your imagination roam freely. You're a young hero, or maybe a villain, with only just awakening mutant abilities. The world is in great peril, which is nothing new in a world where superpowers exist. But the situation calls for heroes and villains that can quickly adapt and grow to tackle the dangerous events to come. And you, my friend, happen to have the ability to manipulate your own genetics to do just that. The Mutant Ability Manager is a game mechanic that will allow players to create unique mutants by spending experience on powers and abilities available to them. Buying abilities will open further advancement in it, but will also lock the same location on the imposed power, which allows for classifications without classes. The Mutant Ability Manager fills a huge void in the game industry. Currently, there are literal dozens, if not hundreds, of superhero genre games where players allowed only a few heroes to choose from at best. There are games such as the numerous Spider-Man and Batman games, which give no significant control over character advancement whatsoever. There are also games like the DCU Online and similar titles, which allow for player choices from a small number of archetypes. In DCU's case, they're all clones of known DC Comics heroes and villains with linear progression. The most open of these games, in my personal experience, has been NCSoft's City of Heroes, which had the typical MMO limitation of static archetypes, traditionally referred to as classes, and allowed for semi-non-linear progression. Abilities were unlocked at a given level, but it was up to the player as to when or if the power was ever purchased, and how it was upgraded with enhancement slots and subsequent enhancements, with logical limitations for balance, of course. It also had the virtue of a number of albeit generic pool powers that any archetype could take for versatility and utility in the character. The most popular of those were the movement powers, the traditional flight, super speed, suited for jumping and teleportation. The manager I propose opens this genre wide by allowing the player to control their character's evolution. It allows the player to create a character that can become anything within the comic book realm's possibilities. Limited, it's hoped, only by their imagination and a short list of restrictions placed on them by the manager. When all is said and done, this manager opens up a nearly limitless number of possible power and ability combinations, which, if utilized correctly, will lead to massive replay and immersive value. Have you ever had an idea in your mind for the ideal superhero or villain and wanted to play that character so badly, but when you go looking, there isn't a game that really allowed for that exact combination of abilities? The Mutant Ability Manager intends to grant players exactly that. The ability to grow a character from early awakening to full-blown potential, hopefully while allowing them to fulfill their dream of seeing an idealized superhero save the world in the process, or an ideal villain ruthlessly dominate the world. Key features of the Ability Manager is the DNA chain. It's the central focus of the entire manager. By interacting with the glowing sections of it, you choose a different level to advance the character in. The early concept for this Ability Manager was based around the DNA molecule, so it was meant to look somewhat like that, with larger molecules and smaller ones, which represent the powers and the abilities. In this instance, I showed the super strength and power having been purchased, and a super lifting limit ability. Over on this other side, you'll notice that the mind power is locked in. Under any circumstance, the player can only ever put a mind power in that slot now. And because this ability is purchased for body power, now this slot is locked away from that power. This is what it looks like in engine, currently quite a bit more refined than the concept, but still effectively the same function. Here we have the super strength power and super lifting. And on this side, we have the mind ability locked in and a mind power, I apologize, and a mind ability locked out. The blueprint for this turned out to be quite the beast. It's considerably larger than I had imagined at first, and was actually quite fun to create. It handles every last bit of the functions except for one of the key features that I wanted to implement. As you see here, we have basic functionality to move up and down the DNA chain. Every level that's not unlocked is listed as locked, and the level that's accessible tells you exactly what to do. We have the manager in window right now where choose to buy super strength and then super lifting. And again, shows the exact opposite being true. That would be what the actual manager looks like. I know there's a mouse in here somewhere. Main blueprint, which handles purchasing the powers, and a secondary blueprint, which handles the DNA rotation. A fun little piece that I felt added a great deal of immersion value to it. The Mutant Ability Manager stands to revolutionize the game industry. Why? Because there is a deficit of genre games that allow players to create the hero or villain, for that matter, of their dreams. Every game currently out there limits the potential to either canned heroes and villains or canned classes. If you have ever imagined a character that could stand next to Superman or Captain America and fight for the world, or next to the Joker or Red Skull and dominate the world, and been disappointed to find that there aren't any games out there whatsoever that allow you to breathe life into that concept, this manager is the answer.
Jeremiah, this is Matthew Marquit. You've been in my classes before online. We've talked a lot. So obviously the idea in theory, right, when you can just do whatever you want, could be a potential game balancing nightmare when you let players do whatever. So what was your process of figuring out how to limit your abilities and how to balance the gameplay so that it would work appropriately?
Well, the first question on my mind was, would there be an opposition in powers? Like the stereotypical is body is opposed to mind. And I added in additionally the elemental powers are opposed to psionic powers. So part of the balancing was solved by locking in an opposed power directly across from the purchased power. And similarly to lock out advancement in abilities under that power. That helped to control it considerably. But as to the grand scale of it, I haven't actually succeeded in solving a great deal of it. I would have to delve further into this concept in order to even begin answering that question.
Well, I suppose that leads into a good potential question as well, which is, do you have any intention on taking this any further? And if so, what do you want to do with it?
Oh, I would love to take this to a full-blown game. I actually spoke with a former student, this friend of mine, Ryan. He was in one of your early classes along with me. And we were discussing this, and it came up, what if there was also a system like this for Magic and technology? And from that discussion, I went further and said, what if the player actually had access to all of these currently listed as origins that are ultimately locked away from each other, and they had a set number of levels, set number of ability points to spend, and they could create the character however they wanted among those origins. And again, that adds an additional balancing nightmare, but also adds a level of immersion value and potential replay value that is through the roof.
Definitely go and do that.
Eric, anything?
So, Jacqueline here, what do you see this like being applied to, like video games, in pen and paper RPGs?
Well, the way I've got it set up, it's pretty much strictly digital. I had questioned whether it would also potentially work as a tabletop game as well, but logistically, I don't know how creating the DNA chain would work that way. I see some potential for that, but it doesn't look quite as pretty.
Yeah, real quick, Matt Prater, Robotics. One thing you might want to do as well, did you think about maybe having a system set up so the user can request building their own powers, where they would suggest to you add-ons or things like that, so you kind of set up a framework and they say, you know, it's a power that you hadn't thought of, but they thought of, and maybe that, you know, could be added to the framework in an open source-esque method. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it does. And actually, I had thought of something like that. The fact that it's virtually impossible to think of every potential power and ability in the comic book realms is something I had to take into account. The fact that my personal experience with these characters is fairly limited meant that my likelihood of overlooking something was pretty high. So leaving it open to the fan base, if I created one, to give me suggestions for my team and allow me to implement those into the games was definitely on the idea table. Thank you.
Hi, this is Erin. I'm an alumni. So we have not met, but I did have a question for you. It sounds like you are planning to take this further. And you mentioned that this isn't something that you in particular are seeing in games today. You've mentioned also some competitors. Can you take me through any processes you may have done during this work to test for resonance with other players? Like, how do you know this is something that other people want?
Well, it started actually with discussions with Kathleen and with some of my friends who also are huge fans of the superhero genre. And their experience with superhero games and my own experience with a very limited number of them led me to believe that there really hadn't been this take on the idea of a mutant character before. And after doing some research myself, I didn't find anything, and it wasn't until last class that one of my classmates told me that there was a game out there that used a DNA chain as part of its system, but it was not anything like what I'm doing or even as functional.
All right, good job, Jeremiah. All right, and with that, those are three presentations for this session A. We'll take a brief intermission and we'll start session B promptly at 12:30. So please, I look forward to seeing you back in there.
Do you want me to pause?
Yeah, you can stop the recording. I'll make a new one.
Put that on hold.
All right.